Alrighty guys, we're back. This is chapter 3 of the painting and texturing multiple apps workflow. And we're covering Cinema 4D, Zbrush, and body paint. And we just covered body paint, so now we're gonna cover some of our multiple app workflow stuff that we can do with Zbrush and Cinema 4D. Alright, so first of all, we're gonna want to break down some of the pitfalls here to the Zbrush and Cinema 4D workflow. I'm going to want to go ahead and get rid of that motion again. And then we're going to want to go ahead and select her weight tag and go ahead and reset her bind pose. And that'll just put us at our bind pose, and then we're going to go ahead and bring her back to her basic face pose at frame 0. Alright, so we're good to go. Now, this is Cinema 4D R14. This will work in R13. But the reason why I say this is R14 is because Maxon still hasn't fixed the problem with their OBJ import and export, even here in R14. In fact, there's some Cineversity tutorials which actually recommend the Riptide Pro plugin. It's kind of funny to me that it hasn't been fixed. A little small pitfall of Cinema 4D, but basically, if you import-export into Zbrush, you're going to run into some issues in regards to point order, in regards to your model flipping, and in regards to certain things just not coming back in correctly. It works fine. There's actually a way that I developed to actually use GoZ and to be able to take your model out to Zbrush automatically, texture there, and bring it back in, and still keep all the weight maps and everything without actually having to use Vamp at all. And in fact, I mean, with a painting and texturing workflow, for real, you don't necessarily have to worry about the weights or the bones for that matter, because since the model is exactly the same and nothing really changes as far as painting goes, you can theoretically just rebuild the materials here in Cinema 4D, and I'll show you how to do that in a later tutorial in this series. Actually, chapter 7, exporting back to Cinema 4D from Zbrush. But we're going to use a better workflow here. We're going to bypass all of that GoZ trouble that we're going to run into. And we're going to go ahead and use Riptide Pro. Riptide Pro has a perfect import and export of OBJs. And using OBJs is the preferred method for the Zbrush and Cinema 4D integration, because you get the perfect model scale, you get the perfect model point count. You actually get the ability to send out your selection tags, and you can send out your selection tags as polygroups in Zbrush, which is important for actually putting back together this texture. Now, if you export directly from DAZ and use it directly in Zbrush, you'll get all those polygroups automatically if you export out as OBJ from DAZ, but then you miss out on some of the initial stuff that you might want to do in Cinema 4D, to prep the model. For instance, creating UV maps in here, and cleaning up the texture a little bit, maybe doing some things in body paint. Maybe there's certain painting functions you like in body paint that you want to use quickly before you actually move out to Zbrush and start poly painting. But either way, I always like to bring my model into Cinema 4D and kind of sort of do some cleanup on it prior to actually taking it out to Zbrush, because Cinema 4D is the hub program that we're using in this particular workflow. So we like to make sure the model is good in here. Either way, what we're going to do is we're going to use Riptide Pro, and we're going to do an Obj Export. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually do a file per mesh. This option might not be selected by default for you if you just started using this plugin. But this file per mesh is going to basically give us a mesh for every single mesh that we have in our object manager. And we can leave everything else alone. Pretty much these options are basically the export to Zbrush options. So you can click that option and basically everything will be the way it needs to be. The only thing that I change is the file per mesh. I like to make sure that I have a file per mesh. Now, the benefit of the file per mesh workflow, the benefit of the breaking the model apart workflow, we've seen all the benefits in regards to both weighting our mesh as well as soft image. Soft image requires that the mesh be broken up, particularly in the face. In Zbrush, we don't want to have the eyes embedded into our model, because when we start doing subdivisions, what will happen is the eyes will subdivide with the mesh, and we can get some really interesting issues. Also, we can't necessarily edit the eyes completely separate of the mesh if we work that way, even despite the fact that we might be able to have like a poly group for the eyes and we might be able to separate them out that way. It's not going to be quite as powerful as if we had the eyes separate. We might want to subdivide the eyes to a different degree than we want to subdivide the mesh. You know, by having the separate objects, we can subdivide the eyes to 4 million polygons and subdivide the body to 4 million polygons, and we can do it separately. And they can each have very, very fine details so that we can paint, because we might want to paint a higher fidelity texture onto the eyes than we want to do on the body. Same thing goes with the jaws and the teeth. We might not even want to paint the jaws and the teeth, and even if we do, we still don't want those inside the head getting subdivided with the body. It's just gonna cause us issues. Same thing with the tongue. And kind of sort of the same thing with the mouth sock, but the mouth sock is attached to the head, so we can that's fine. We can deal with that. And that'll have a poly group. All right, so before we actually do this export though, what we want to do is we want to tell Riptide what selections we want to be our polygroups in Cinema 4D. And this is the beauty of the Riptide Pro functionality. We can actually tell it exactly which polygroups we want to be in our ZBrush model. So we go ahead and turn on the old mesh real quick. What I want to check is actually whether or not, and yes, we have selections here that are actually named quite nicely. So I can actually tell what these selections are. So what I'm going to do is, because the point counts are basically the same between both of these, or at least I think they are, we're going to go ahead and, yeah, because these are just numbers, we're going to go ahead and actually delete all of these polygon selections off of this model. And we're going to attempt to see if we can use these polygon selections and use these polygon selections we have on the old model. We're going to attempt it. It might not work. It might not work for us, but we're going to attempt it. And yeah, we lost our texture mask, because our texture masks rely on our actual selection tag. So we're gonna do a Control Z. I didn't think it would work, but I wanted to try to make it a little easier on them. Alright, so what we want to do is we want to go through first, and we kind of want to sort of figure out what these selections actually are. So we know this is feet, so we can call this feet selection, and we can go ahead and hide unselected, and we can hide the old mesh so we can tell what we're doing. And yeah, so that selection is dead. We basically don't have that. Probably was like the eyes or something. So we can go ahead and unhide all to bring everything back, and we can go ahead and select this, and then we can do a hide unselected. Let's see if this selection exists. It doesn't. We can go ahead and delete that too, and we can do a unhide all, and we can just keep going through and basically figuring out see. Let's do a double click again, and then do a hide unselected, and we can also hide the close, so we can kind of sort of see what we're doing here. And I'm going to hide the join and rigging components too, so I'm just left with just the mesh. And yeah, that selection doesn't exist either. And so we can actually go through and now we're getting somewhere. Now we can start to see some selections here. So this is like our skin, like our kind of sort of our upper arm selection, something like that. And this is the this torso upper selection. And so yeah, we can just go through. If your selections are messed up like mine, and just go through, go ahead and name all those so you can tell what your selections are. And I'll meet you guys back on the other side. Alrighty guys, and so we're back. What I did was I revealed via my layers panel. If we go to better layout here, I revealed my face robot components basically in the manager. And what I did was I actually just copied the body selection tags to make it a little easier on myself. You can do the same thing. You can select all of these. And I actually deleted all the materials as well on Test and Mesh, and copied the materials from the body tag as well. They gave me all the materials except for the materials for the head. And because the head is only made up of 4 selection tags, particularly the skin face, the lip, the nostril, and the skin head selection, I basically recreated those selections from scratch. Or actually what I did was before I deleted the selection tags off of this object, I kept the 4 selection tags that are related to the face. I basically found those, renamed them, and kept those, deleted all the other tags, and added the tags from the body mesh that we cut out. All right. After that, there was one selection in particular that was just messed up, and that was the neck selection, and that's probably because of the fact that the neck is where the break was made for soft image. So in order to fix that, all we had to do was just recreate the selection. It was pretty simple. If we come here and we look for the neck selection here, okay, the skin neck selection, you can see that we actually have the selection as we got it from Daz. It's perfect. But what had happened was it started out something like this after the nitro bake. So it was like half the neck, and then the rest was basically untextured. So if you're going through this workflow, you'll probably notice that the neck is gray, like there's no texture applied to it in that particular area. And all you have to do is just basically recreate the selection. So based on the area that's gray, you just basically select all those gray polygons and add them to the selection. With this selection tag selected, all you have to do is just set the selection again. It's going to overwrite the selection, so it's just basically going to add all the rest of that polygon area to the current selection. And then Cinema 4D, after a minute of thinking or whatever, should automatically update your textures to reflect that the texture is corrected. As for the skin face selection and all those other selections, you would basically take your selection tags. You can lock down your manager to make it easier for yourself. And then you can come over here and you can select, say, the back head selection, and you can drag that into this field here, the selection field, and fill it in, and that'll basically re-add those textures to the areas of the face. So once we have our character completely retextured and we've made sure that all our texture tags are nicely referring to the areas that we want them to refer to, you could create new selection tags just fine. Although for the Daz workflow, we basically want to have the same selection tags that we had coming out of Daz. It's going to make it easier for us to re-add the textures to everything. All right, so if we create our own UV map, then yeah, we can use our own selection tags, our own texture tags. The Daz tags are pretty good because they're going to allow you to hide specific areas of the body pretty well and allow you to paint really, really nicely, even if you did want to paint your own textures onto your model, as we'll be doing very soon. But anyway, we need to tell Zbrush what polygroups we want. And we do this by using the OBJ's ability to be able to have groups. Cinema 4D, of course, doesn't do this automatically. If we export an OBJ as is right now, we're not going to get any of those groups. So Riptide has a helper tag called group that will allow us to add groups that will be exported with our OBJ. And what we can do is we can just go ahead and just select all of these polygroups that we've created to be groups that are stored in the OBJ format, so that when this gets imported into ZBrush, we have those polygroups. All right, so we're going to click OK, and we basically get this Riptide group tag now that has all of our polygroups, or all of our selection tags as groups. All right, so that's going to help us tremendously when we go into ZBrush. So now all we have to do is just export out our object. We can also create group tags for some of our other objects. We can go through the same workflow that we just went through. Just basically cleaning up the materials and prepping out our tags. We probably only need 2 tags for the jaw, probably just the teeth and the jaw itself. So we can figure out which 2 selection tags refer to the teeth and the jaws. And then we could delete all the other tags and basically create a group tag that would have those 2 elements. That way when we go into Zbrush and we import this as a subtool, we get the ability to have polygroups in that subtool that basically refer to the teeth and to the jaw. All right, but let's go ahead and just export test as mesh first. That way you guys can really see for yourselves what I'm talking about. So what we're going to do in this particular case is, I think it will probably be easiest to just go ahead and copy this file, since this is what we own. This is the only thing we want to export right now, is just the mesh, and just paste it into a new file. And yeah, we'll change these absolute paths. It really doesn't matter because we're not going to really keep this file, but this file is just a temporary file that will allow us to export out our model and basically not export out anything else. All right, so with her by herself, we're going to go ahead and do an Obj Export. We're going to go ahead and export to Zbrush. We're going to go ahead and do a file per mesh, which would normally export all the separate meshes out. In this particular case, it's only going to really export this one mesh. And then we're going to click OK. Okay, and then we're going to save this in our usual place. So that's CG 3D modeling. Underneath Testa, and we're going to save in the OBJ folder as an OBJ. Click OK. And Riptide finishes exporting. All right. And if we come over to our Windows Explorer, and just in the background here, I'm just moving to the correct folder here. All right, so we've got the Testa folder laid out here, and you'll see that we have an OBJ exported out quite nicely that has all our information from Cinema 4D, with none of the Cinema 4D pitfalls that would normally happen with the GoZ transfer.